Hello, everybody. Welcome to Feedback for the week of December 6th. This is usually the part of the show where I introduce my panelists, but I don't want to anger anyone by not mentioning the beautiful art that they send into Nintendo Power in the 80s or their perfect NeoGAF post. So if you wouldn't mind, gentlemen, please introduce yourselves and find a way to somehow minimize your entire careers by giving us about 3 sentences as to what you guys have done up to this point.
I like it in 3 sentences. Garnet Lee, I host podcasts, Weekend Confirmed, used to be One Up Yours, editorial director at Gamefly Media, where we run Shack News and have been, around for a decade or so. I don't know, doing stuff, writing about the games.
Yes.
And trying not to pay too much attention to the NeoGAF.
Matt, on the other hand, pays a lot of attention to the NeoGAF.
More or less. Matt Kyle. I am currently the senior producer on X-Play, and I have been on the show for 11 years as of Monday this week.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Monday.
Well done.
Nice.
December 5th, 2000, I was given the assignment to write the review of Grandia 2 for the Dreamcast. My first game writing assignment I was ever paid for.
And by paid, you mean they gave you some Oreos, and you were like, I'm writing about games. This is a perfect salary.
They bought me lunch.
Yeah.
No, it was an actual paid gig. And my friend, who also got a gig, the gig there at the same time, was assigned Microsoft board game collection for the PC. So I think I got the better half of that coin.
And you're still here, and your friend no longer around.
He runs a game store now. Runs his own game store.
Really?
Yep.
Not doing so bad. And sir?
I'm Dan Amrick. I used to be for 16 years, I wrote reviews of video games. My first paid review was, I think, Eternal Champions for Genesis, or possibly
Nice.
Total Carnage for Super Nintendo.
Wow.
So, yeah, I've been around a long time. I did 7 years at GamePro, 3 years at OXM. I was at the World of Warcraft official magazine briefly to launch that. I was Games Radar. So been around now. I have sold out to Activision. I'm their social media manager. So I fight with 14-year-olds on Twitter for a living.
Sounds like fun.
It does sound like fun.
Sounds like
but
fun.
no.
Before we get into the actual conversation we have here, honestly, worst thing you've had to deal with as an adult. Have you, like, the thing that came across your desk and you're like, I am a grown-ass man and I actually have to handle this problem because this kid did this?
Oh boy. Gee, there are too many options. Yesterday, I got enraged because somebody didn't know how to spell ludicrous because they thought like the rapper was the real word. They're like, this is ludicrous. And I'm like, no, that's just, his name is Chris. And I like, that just made me go, I can't believe I have to explain this. And how can I do this without being a complete jerk? So I've just, yeah. That's the latest thing that's enraged me from these kids on my lawn.
Have an M&M.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to. It's not rap. It's just candy. They don't get it.
Well, listen, guys, the reason we're here, obviously...
Candy wrapper.
I see what you did there.
Good night, everybody.
We're all set.
Not going to get any better than that, folks.
The reason we're all here is because I think we're very representative of what journalism has been, is, and probably will be in the future.
Damn.
But because I know, which is kind of a sad thing. If you come to our parties and hang out at our houses,
apocalypse now.
it's kind of scary considering. But this conversation all got started last week when GamePro announced that they were finally going to be shutting down their magazine division. I know a lot of people, for me anyway, GamePro was my first experience with gaming journalism of any sort. They've announced as of actually Monday of this week, they've shut down the magazine, and GamePro.com will redirect to PCWorld.com, the November issue being their last issue. I don't want to say that print is dead. I think that is the biggest. It's a blanket that they tend to throw over print media as a whole, but I think magazine subscriptions actually this year were up from the last couple of years. So I don't think print media is dead, but as far as gaming journalism is concerned, specifically GamePro, I mean, this is something that it had enough credibility to be able to. I think it should have stayed around, but for some reason they shut the doors. Just quickly to go around the room, we'll start with you, Garnett. Why did they do that? I think it's still a credible property and a viable property.
Sure.
Why do you think GamePro shut down outside of what they've talked about?
I think you're being very generous by saying print's not dead because it was buried actually a couple of years ago. So not only is it dead, it's long since been put in the ground. And the reason is that what we used to do in print was convey a medium that we didn't have a great way to bring to you vis-a-vis the internet, which wasn't yet developed to the level it is. I mean, we didn't have broadband. We didn't have YouTubes. We didn't have a great way to bring video to you. We didn't have, oodles of bandwidth to bring you screenshots all the time, which is really what people want to see.
Sure.
We see increasingly that the attention span of the reader has dropped from, we used to do reviews on the order of 2,500 words, and I look at 800-word reviews now and wonder, how many people are actually getting to the end of this review before they're skipping to the score and saying,
or reading the bullet points on the left side of the column.
Right. And then they want to see the video.
Right.
So, that's why this property didn't have a chance to fight and succeed. And I think there's probably a place for a more coffee table approach to a video game magazine. You see what Killscreen's doing, and those guys are right on point, I think, with where print journalism could go, with what we could see in the space. But as far as mainstream goes, I mean, it's going to follow the same thing everyone else does. We're going to look at it on our phones. We're going to look at it on our iPads. We're going to look at it, between things at lunch on our PCs.
Right. And but speaking of that, I mean, I think I could agree with you in that, actually holding a physical magazine, probably not the most appealing thing to kids nowadays, right? It's totally not cool to kill trees anymore, you guys. But as far as Wired.com, or Wired is a great app, as far as their magazine is concerned, there are a lot of magazines that are releasing essentially their enhanced versions of what their magazines already offer. So I still think long-form journalism does exist in some form. I mean, those Wired, I am reading 4- and 5-page articles on my iPad. Do you think maybe that companies just need to focus on finding a different way to deliver the content that they already do, or do you think they should just stop doing long-form journalism altogether?
Well, I think you have to look at what you're trying to accomplish and what you're delivering to the audience and what the audience is looking to read. There's a new property out in the tech space called The Verge, which is a bunch of the old Engadget guys who moved over with Vox Media to create this new but old approach. And if you look at what they're doing, they've taken some cues from print. One of the things that's really interesting about working in print is that you have a much more broad palette of what you can do on the page. In working in the web space, we have very set parameters of this is what HTML can do, this is what a browser can do, and here's how we can lay out a page. Right. Whereas the beauty of working back in the day on EGM or any of the magazines was that you'd sit down with an art director and it was a really collaborative process. And you'd say, well, you know what, I have this fantastic map. And while I was looking at this map, the developer was telling me about how they're using different pockets of it to do things in the game. And you could do call-outs and you could do, all this great graphical treatment to really convey the message you were trying to through the pictures and through the copy. But in web, you see this, well, here's the copy, and it's inside a box. And then here's the media, and it's inside another box. And then you go look at the media. And we haven't found a good way to bring those two together.
Right. And I think we run into this problem a lot on the television show as well. I mean, to your point about 2,500 words reviews being the norm, and now if it's over 800, people are going to stop reading at some point. X-Play reviews used to be 10 minutes long. It'd be like an entire A block of the show was a review on something. Now, if we do 3 minutes, we're starting to worry about whether we should cut some content out of that review, and that's changed a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think and I think they could be longer. I mean, we do 2-parters now and again for the big reviews, and those total up to about 5.5 minutes, and they seem to do okay on the website. I mean, I don't know if there's a way to track who's watching all of them as opposed to just letting it roll and then running down to see who's screaming in the comment section. But my San Andreas review in the old days was 9 minutes and 25 seconds long total. It was a
and
two-parter.
you got a pat on the back for that.
It was considered an accomplishment. We did that on purpose.
Yeah.
And that was really great because I missed the days a little bit when we could kind of stretch it out and you could cover the subject and then you can get some gags in there. You could kind of make it interesting. But now like a 2:30 review is it's just long enough to make an argument.
Right.
It's just long enough to cover the subject, which some would also argue that's how long the review should be. Like, get all that extraneous crap out of it. Tell me what it is. Tell me what the score is. Tell me what you think. Get out.
Right.
And there is definitely merit to that argument too. I always enjoyed my favorite magazine growing up was Video Games and Computer Entertainment, VG&CE, because it had longer form column reviews, and it was run by Andy Eddy, who was basically like the guy who I patterned my writing in reviews after. He still works in the industry. He's a great guy.
Yeah, one of the coolest things ever was when he congratulated me on getting engaged. I was like, you have no idea how much this means to me, Andy. I've literally been reading you, not to date you, I don't want to offend you, but this means a lot. It's like Zeus came down and blessed our matrimony.
Oh, no, he knows he's old. Like, his MySpace is the oldest gamer.
It was just a fantastic moment for me.
What's MySpace again?
Yeah, well, I guess that's part of the joke.
Yeah.
But you're right.
It was great reviews because it was written like written as a coherent argument. They always took their time and figured out how long they needed to make their argument. And I kind of learned how to when I got to high school and it was all about constructing a thesis, and I was like, oh, it's like a game review in VG&CE. I get it. Yeah, it was just like I'd already seen that, and it was very some people would call it dry. But I thought it was more valuable than what I was seeing in like the little quick bite of like the EGM boxes.
Right. And then, Dan, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you're in a position now where you're applauded if you can convey information in 140 characters or less.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you are right now.
Well, it's funny because I used VGNC for my college, too. I pointed that out to my professor who believed that video games were toys and that I should be going into music journalism,
right.
which I did for a little while, but I kind of got burned out on mid-90s alt-angst rock, and I was like, you know what, games are always fun and always interesting.
Right.
So I showed her that as an example, and I said to Andy, I'm like, I used this Prince of Persia 2 review to justify both of our existences, you know. But yeah, I've always been a fan of shorter writing. I love diving into a good feature, and I like long-form journalism, but at the same time now I feel like if I don't get it all in 140 characters, then I'm not doing my job. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of all the attention span that people seem to want to give. It's not all the attention span that they have, but I think it's all they really want to commit to it.
Right.
At the same time, you know, we're talking about print, and I've started to separate print and magazine because I do like that deluxe magazine experience you're talking about. The idea that you can do a deluxe treatment, that you can do fancy layout things. You can really make that an experience. Mm-hmm. And I'm enjoying getting that on my iPad now. Mm-hmm. The question is, do people want to read that long form magazine stuff about games?
Right.
Because as you pointed out, you know, other subscriptions are up. It's the magazine as a format is still very successful and still has that sort of a friend at one of the magazines that I worked at when we were facing, you know, oh my God, online is eating our lunch. He goes, well, you know, you have to think of the web like a hamburger stand and a magazine like a steakhouse, because there's nothing wrong with going and getting a hamburger every day for lunch. But every once in a while, maybe say once a month, you go out to the steakhouse and you want to spend a little bit more for a deluxe experience, for a fancier meal, and you feel good about getting that fancier experience. So I think that in GamePro's case, I didn't see an iPad or a Zinio. Well, actually, GamePro had a Zinio version because I worked on it, but they didn't keep it around. You know, because I think that, I remember saying in the forums around 2002. So we've got this digital version of GamePro that you can download and you can read it on your computer. And everybody in the forum said, "Why on earth would I want to do that?"
Right.
And they were way ahead of the curve, but the audience didn't want it, and we didn't have something as convenient as an iPad or a tablet computer to read on it. So my hope is that magazines will continue to do what they do well and consider what their audience is, like Garnett was saying, like what does the audience want? For the audience that wants that longer form experience, I think they're just going to abandon print because, yeah, ecologically it's a nightmare. You have all kinds of problems with that business model, but the format itself is not so bad. In fact, it's still kind of fun to dig into a magazine.
Sure.
It's just the magazines aren't going to be on paper anymore.
Right. I mean, again, part of the problem is that we're dealing with attention spans that are far shorter than what they were, 5 or 10 years ago. But what we like to do here on Feedback is we like to wildly speculate about solutions. That way, if anything ever comes to fruition, we can take credit for it.
Excellent.
So what you were saying earlier about them just not finding a way to kind of blend the two and marry these two ideas, what do you think is something that maybe GamePro could have done to fix this problem? Could they have released, like you said, maybe for one subscription you get the enhanced version on the iPad, you get some sort of browser-based thing, and then you get the magazine as well. What could have GamePro have done to marry all these ideas?
So I'm kind of close to the question, of course, since I worked with John Davison for a long time, and a number of my friends were there, including Karen Chu, who was instrumental in the art design on the paper. I think that it's a tough challenge to try and wed print and digital in the game space, and so I agree with everything you guys were saying to the extent that I think print is still there. However, because of the very nature of what we're into, video games, it's a tough marriage of the two medias. So I think that where GamePro really needed to go was to continue their commitment to their online space and then build the social side. I mean, there's a reason the publishers are jumping into the social side so very much. Citizen journalism has become a huge part of the game, and I mean the game in general of media, of everything we talk about. You look at the Occupy movement, and we have a lot to be thankful for that citizen journalists were out there. And the same thing happens inside the video game world, where people post YouTube videos right away of, here's me playing this game I just saw. The differentiation has to be, okay, so why the heck do I care that I'm reading a site where you guys do this professionally? And so I have to be able to bring, great commentary and then some framework, some background, well, here's why this is important and here's some context of what's been good about it. So I think you need to start thinking outside of the traditional just, I'm going to put everything out right away because the citizen journalists do that stuff, and then create, more thoughtful and better content, but also still thinking about how the audience wants it. That doesn't mean that I give you, a 5-page New Yorker piece on the morality of whether or not pointing a gun at someone in Call of Duty makes me violent or not, because that's just way over the top and way past, and that's not what the audience is interested in.
Right.
But it might mean that I get into interesting things about how the tactics in multiplayer shooters have developed over the past 5 years as the games had advanced and the level design has advanced. And maybe that's a multi-part thing, and maybe it's it's done visually and it has some video in it and it has some screenshots in it, and you pull the community piece into it, and you have to really start thinking about how all these pieces to come together into one piece, and then is accessible through my phone or through my iPad or through a lightweight client on top of the desktop.
Right. I mean, one could argue that jobs like Dan's job were created because of the explosion of citizen journalism, because now you're having to, as opposed to you having a staff of 10 journalists, you essentially have a staff of 1 million that you're trying to control,
Sort of.
or at least trying to communicate with.
Well, I sure as heck don't have a staff of 10.
It's funny because I do kind of feel like an army of one. I mean, when I got this job, it's very closely patterned after Major Nelson. I think he's done a great job of that community outreach. But the thing that made me seriously consider jumping the fence was that I got an email when I was at OXM. I used to answer the reader mail. And I would often just reply personally, which made me really good at doing Twitter when people wanted to talk to me. But somebody said, no offense, but I don't trust your reviews. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. Did we say something that you felt was really unqualified or something? He goes, no, I just mean like the media in general. I don't trust any of your reviews.
Oh.
I said, well, I'm not trying to be a troll, but out of curiosity, if you don't go to, obviously you're going to trust your friends because you have that relationship. But if you don't feel like you have a relationship with at least one media outlet that you feel you can trust, where are you getting your game information that you really trust? And he said, the developers. I said, so you believe that they're going to be unbiased? He goes, yeah, because you guys are like all on the take. I've heard that one. that
but the
allegation.
guys who are legitimately on the take,
right. And I even
on the take.
I explained it. I said, so the guy whose like actual financial future is tied to the success of that game, his kid's getting braces or not because that game sells or doesn't. You believe that he's telling the truth about the game, and I'm somehow compromised with my interpretation of it. He goes, yeah, pretty much. I'm like, here we go. Thank you, Activision. I'll be right there.
Right.
Like that was a strange thing to me because, I thought that was the single most biased thing you could be, was to have a financial, emotional, and creative stake in the game, whereas I had none of those things in the media, but there was still this suspicion that I was up to something, up to no good.
Right. Well, there's definitely a deep-seated mistrust of people who are paid to review games right now online. And I don't quite know where that comes from.
I wonder if it's jealousy.
Some of it, maybe. I mean,
not all of it, but some of it.
Well, I think part of it is like what if I and I guess I had that a little bit when you're working some menial retail job and you love video games and you see people who who are writing stuff. And let's face it, there's some reviews out there where you're just like, I could have written better than that in sixth grade.
Sure.
And you're sitting there, you're busting your ass for minimum wage, and you're like, I could do that job that guy's doing if I'd been given that opportunity, but I never had that opportunity because I don't live in the right city, or I don't, I didn't know the right people, or that. And yeah, I can see why some bitterness would come up, and you'd be like, well, like screw that guy for not liking whatever game that I like because I think it should have been this.
Right.
And that that's probably why the citizen journalism stuff has arisen as strongly as it has, because you've got these people who actually can do the job and are doing the job for themselves. And I think because they're not entirely beholden to sort of, because there is like a PR machine now that a lot of the main outlets are plugged into, not that they're on the take, but it's just, it works a certain way. And it wasn't like that even 10 years ago. The rise of the PR person has been very meteoric in the last decade or so in this industry, because it used to be like you'd be embedded with the developers for like a week and you'd write your feature about this, and and now it's more like everything's filtered through. They're very on point, on message, because it's become such a valuable industry, and it's become you're putting millions of dollars on the line for every one of these games, and you cannot just basically trust these yahoos to go out and cover you correctly or the way you want it to be. It's a very measured thing. It's more like the movie industry now, but you've got these guys that can very much tailor, things to a community that they're plugged into. You see that on GAF all the time. Certain guys are doing the citizen journalism thing, and they're in threads about games and saying like, I'm doing this thing with this game. What do you guys want to know? And they'll say, we want to know this, this, and this. They come back with it, and that's exactly what those guys wanted. Right. And that is a freedom that they have an agility that makes them valuable in that regard. And I think you're going to see more and more of that as the line between what a professional outlet can do and what a private citizen can do is blurred more and more,
right.
and more as the companies start to become, amenable to the idea of
Sure.
letting those folks into events that they previously couldn't have gotten into.
Right. And then on the other end of the spectrum, and this is something that I know I've noticed over the last decade or so, I use E3 as an example. E3 is an industry event, but we've seen the quote-unquote industry in the last 10 years change quite a bit. And by that I mean, 10 years ago, it was literally you had to work for an outlet or you needed to somehow scan an NVIDIA business card and then print up your own fake ones to sneak in.
That may or may not have happened.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but now, you do have these websites, and a lot of them are these small homegrown websites, but they were invited, and they have just as much right to be there as I think we are.
And they're working hard.
And they
you
are
see
working
these
really
guys
hard.
working hard. They're not just there to get the free Wavebird.
Sure, but which is always a treat, Wavebird. Thank you. But that said, when we go to these events that these companies spend a lot of money to put on as far as journalism events are concerned, it really is still the same peer group of people that we've seen over the last decade or so. So to your point about people kind of changing, their perception of what the filter of this information is, game companies still consider us to be those filters, but it sounds like we're being trusted less and less as the years go on. So when do game companies start to invite NeoGAF forum members instead of flying one of us out to one of their events? Like, when does that start to change?
That has already happened, actually. Yeah. I mean, generally, this was on Call of Duty Black Ops. There was a media day at Treyarch, but then there was a separate community day just for the guys that were running hardcore websites who were doing everything that you were talking about. They go to the shows, they cover exactly that, their pinpoint accuracy. They know that those citizen journalists and the bloggers and the fan site guys have a very powerful, extremely targeted voice, and they know that they're trusted. So like, well, look, you didn't have access before because you weren't in the quote-unquote media, but, you're not media, but you're not media. So why don't we set up something just for you guys? And so, yeah, I mean, depends on the title, but I know they did that for Black Ops, and we did that for Elite too. There was a special party just for VIPs, no media, just the community guys to show them Elite for the first time the day before E3.
And Old Republic, they would do that a lot. I remember every Old Republic event I've been to, I think was press, and then afterwards they let in community sites and stuff. And with games that run on community, like an MMO, that is your bread and butter. I mean, those are the people that are going to tell the community whether or not they want to put that pre-order down or not.
Right. And then Garnett, as far as you guys are concerned, just on the the hiring and employing of these journalists, I feel like the movement, it's not so much you never really had to have like a broadcast journalism or a straight journalism degree to do this particular job, but it sounds like it's a lot easier for somebody to just write a bunch of really well-received posts online. That's just as easy to catch the attention of a gaming company or maybe a media outlet as it would be to go through 4 years of school, get a degree, and then reach out to a company like yours.
Sure. I mean, the traditional position of media, publisher, and those relationships is going to continue to evolve. I think one thing that's not going to change, though, is that I think the interesting thing is that publishers have this push-pull between multiple departments. It's a more complex picture than we could probably paint in an hour.
Right.
Because you've got a marketing department that wants to do one thing with a product. You've got a production team that wants to do another thing with a product. And then you've got a studio that's building the game and is like, why the hell are you calling my game a product? It's not a product. It's a game. We're putting our blood, sweat, and tears into it. And so, each of those teams has different goals and objectives, and that's where you see the citizen journalists start to come into it. And that's how you see, PR plans tailored for media folks to come into it. And to answer your question about where do folks out there who want to get into this fit into the picture, having a journalism background is always a great thing to have.
Absolutely.
I've always sat here and said, well, what we do really isn't journalism. Because it's not really journalism.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a flexy definition of journalism that's evolved a lot over the past couple of decades. But look, we're media and entertainment reporters. I tend to think of myself as a game critic.
Reviewing games does not make you a game journalist, and I feel like it's an insult to real journalists who are out there sweating and researching stories and finding all that stuff. Whereas I'd never felt bad calling myself a game critic. I felt it was more accurate.
Not at all.
Not at all. And I think that's kind of...
My ideal as editorial director, and this is something that, I'm not going to take credit for. I pull this from, all the time I spent with John Davison, is to apply journalistic practices to what we do in our day-to-day everything that we do. So every piece of content that goes to the site gets a second set of eyes.
Right.
But unlike print, where it gets 3 and 4 sets of eyes and it passed through folders and it was redlined and yellow highlighted and got lots of attention, that second set of eyes is Do we miss things? Sure, we miss things,
Sure.
and people are very quick to jump in there. So if you are out there and interested in getting into this business, the advice is the same thing it was a decade ago. Write some more, and then write some more, and always ask for feedback, always solicit opinions, and now you have better opportunity to get that out there than ever before. You got Google Plus, you got Facebook, you got Twitter. Very easy to start a Tumblr blog, start getting yourself out there, getting people to read it, and then you'll be in the pipeline to get into that citizen side of it, at which point in time you'll catch our attention. It's not hard.
Right.
Especially if you know where the comma goes.
Yeah, we've had this conversation many times on feedback because Matt is the one that handles the majority of the viewer emails, both good and bad, very, very bad. And a lot of the problems that I think we have, and because we read a lot of the emails on XPlay, and I feel like a lot of them don't make the show, not because conceptually it wasn't a great question. It was just arranged in such a manner that we didn't know what the they were talking about. But it's like, there's enough pieces in here. This was probably really, really good. We just don't know what you're going for here. And that is, a big problem, that grammar in a world of text messaging and instant, like my little brother.
And there's a point at which, like, sometimes sometimes maybe there's a good question, maybe there's something in there, but it's weirdly worded. And I know how you guys are when you read the questions. There's our first move is usually to make fun of whoever did it. And sometimes we get emails, and I'm like, maybe this isn't someone we should be making fun of.
Right.
Like it's you don't know.
Like he's putting on lipstick and he's got a list when cleaning the rifle, or
I was thinking
maybe
more of
they just
not
have problems
entirely
Yes,
there
yes,
mentally.
okay.
It's just
you never
like,
know with some of our fans.
Yeah.
It gets a little dicey. But it's thanks, Frank. Frank knows. I work on the web team, you guys. I totally get it. But that is something that it could. My little brother is 25 years old, so he's he's almost 7 years younger than me. And he was telling me about a meeting that he had with one of his college professors, where the entire meeting was held over instant message. And so I said, hey, the next time you have a conversation with your college professor, do me a favor and save that. I don't know if it's legal. It's probably not. But do me a favor and just save that communication. And this college professor was using like text speak, like LOL. I mean, everything was shortened. And I was like, this is the way that kids are learning how to write nowadays. I mean, this is an actual communicate. Like when I was first of all, I had to like write a letter to my professor and give that to him. And it's, things have just changed so much.
Feedback opening all kinds of new subjects. I mean, this is a much bigger societal question. I mean, this whole, like, we're going to communicate via text and instant message. I think that the thing is, why don't you go talk to him?
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Have you ever tried to pin a professor down for office hours? It's impossible. So we had guys that were in like half an hour on Thursday, and he wasn't even there for that. So yeah, email was a revelation when it came to talking to professors. But now it's like it's to the point. I love the pictures of the college classrooms now that everyone's got the laptop out.
Right.
Because when I was in college, you weren't allowed to bring a laptop because they thought you were cheating.
Yeah.
And now, of course, you probably are. But Wi-Fi, you're online.
Well, they offer Wi-Fi connections in all the classrooms, which is, I think that's completely counter.
I didn't graduate. Google graduated.
Right.
But one thing, if we could go back to kind of the like what you said about the guy who didn't trust you.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a limited experience because I've been doing this 11 years, but I've only been doing it one place. But I've never seen anyone get paid off or influenced for give this game more or less because we're happy with it or we want this or whatever.
Right.
That has never happened.
Yeah. And we would arguably, we work in the most pay-offable area of this industry, the television portion. And it's true. I mean, people believe that Microsoft has paid for our studios, in which case, seriously, send us some new microphones, Microsoft. These suck. Yeah. But
especially when you got me on.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Again, we're going to dub like Paris Hilton's voice. You're going to sound really funny when we cut this in post. But I agree with you 100%. A lot of people look at these gaming events that we go to and think that is in and of itself payola, and it's not. I mean, people have to spend money to get their product out there, and yeah, if I drink a bunch and I get to ride on an elephant while I shoot an AK-47, I might have a better experience with your game than I would if I had to play it in like a Motel 6. But at the end of the day, they're not paying for my opinion. They're just providing a fun experience for everybody to get together and play their game.
Yeah, it's not black and white, but it's certainly a gray area. And I think you have to be diligent in watching everybody. If you're running a team or if you're writing for a team, you have to be very diligent in watching what you're saying and what you're doing and be true to yourself. I mean, this has always been my approach, has been, look, as long as I'm honest to myself and am putting myself out there with my honest opinion and can back it up, and backing it up is a big part of it. Don't make a comment and then not have some foundation for it. Then I'm always good. And, I look at the folks who, become the ones that throw these slings and arrows. And I figured, if you can be out there in public, that's going to happen. And if you have an opinion, that's going to happen. People are going to be against you. And it's always going to be the ones who are not on your team that are the first ones to write something. Right. And so, I always go, I probably spend too much time reading those things because they do bother me. But I try to sift through them logically and reasonably and say, okay, this person just cursed me out and called me a million names, but is there something in here that actually gives me a point to address? Or is there something that I missed? Or is there something that I should pay attention to about their point of view? Or are they just trolling me?
Right. And I mean, there's a point to that in that outside of how it makes you feel on a personal level, this new over the last 5 years or so, this complete transparency, this lack of any sort of barrier between people that are experiencing your product and then the people that actually make the product. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I personally think I've made the mistake of reading message boards on my own, and I feel like I've learned a lot about the way that people want information from me. And a lot of it is wrong. And a lot, I'm sorry, I grew up in Louisiana. I'm going to sound stupid because that's how people sound down there, and it's not my fault. But I have learned a lot about on the whole, how to provide information in a better way. But I think it's a good thing. I think the fact that people,
it's a great thing.
Your job exists, that people can reach out to activists and say, hey, this is what I want. And you're the guy who works at the company that can actually communicate with. I think it's a fantastic thing.
It's definitely a two-way street. Again, it would be nice if sometimes people would say those things in a polite manner instead of an accusation.
You know what? We have to have a thick skin.
Yeah,
right.
And that's true. I mean, I have had a lot of trouble discerning the difference between the trolls and the legitimate stuff. I do have to sift through. And I got this back when I was at magazines, too. People would write in nasty letters, and I would get to the heart of what it was. Oh, you're really angry about this because this just... 9 times out of 10, it didn't live up to your expectations.
Sure.
It was all about meeting expectations. So it was the magazine or the game or whatever it is. So, yeah, in my position, it's both a blessing and a curse that when something goes wrong, I find out about it right away. And I can go back to the customer service team. I can go back to the development team. I can go back to the PR team and whoever else needs to know, the production team, if it's really a problem with the game. And so, on one hand, my job is to get information out like, hey, I'm the cheerleader. Here's what's going on at Activision. And at the same time, I'm also absorbing, and people are coming by my office all the time saying, what are they angry about this week?
Right.
I'm like, well, how much time do you have?
Have a seat. That's why I got this couch instead of this chair, because
exactly.
you need you to be comfortable.
So, yeah, it has to be a two-way street. That transparency, that's why I'm here, because people, it's almost like, well, you can talk directly to the developer. I have a lot of people come to me and say, why don't you tell Infinity Ward to do this? I'm like, because Infinity Ward's on Twitter, and they're reading their own forums,
Right.
you could be talking directly to them. Let me just direct your call. At that point, I'm just an operator.
Right.
But they want an answer, and they want that access. I'm like, you already have that access. That terrifying access, And there's no more gatekeepers. You can go directly to the people that made the game and say, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And it can drive you absolutely batty if you let it. But if you can boil it down to the essence of, this is what really I care about as a gamer. I have this grand unified gaming theory that the only reason that people get upset about anything is because we love games. You put a lot of emotion into your game. If you don't feel like the game returns that emotion, that's when you get trolls. That's when you get user reviews that are 10 or 1. That's when you get all this, this knee-jerk reaction. It's because I love games. I don't want you to threaten my games.
Right.
So when they see anything that threatens their games, that's when they're going to lash out. Even if it doesn't threaten their games. I mean, if I can put a fine point on it, people went crazy about Call of Duty Elite when they found out that it would have an optional pay service.
Right.
It was optional, and all the stuff that was going to be free was actually pretty good. But people didn't know enough, and they just lashed out. And, of course, Activision needed to get that information out faster. And I'm like, hey, when can we talk about this? Well, it's a couple weeks from now. And I'm like, they're going to eat me alive.
We need to have this conversation now.
Back to that complex picture within all the different teams pushing different agendas and then trying to figure out how that then works with us who trying to report on it.
Right. And I mean, that in and of itself, I mean, we're all friends here and we've all known each other for a long time. We can find out that, yes, Activision will be talking about this 3 weeks from now. As somebody who needs to report on this information, I feel like a lot of times, even for us, it's really hard to, I don't want to say honor embargoes. That's not hard to do, but it's like, Dan, I know that you're telling me to wait 3 weeks, but somebody's going to break this story a week from now, and it's not going to be us. Some fan is going to find out about this, and so it's hard, I think, for us as media to. We are the ones that have to honor these relationships.
Right.
People on message boards do not have to honor those relationships, and that's hard. That's a hard thing to do sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, you look right now, case it's unfolding with the girl with the dragon tattoo. about to have a review that goes up in one of the New York magazines this week, and it's violating the embargo that all the movie critics agreed to, and there's quite a hullabaloo stirring over it, and it brings up the interesting question of, well, why do you guys honor these embargoes? Well, we honor the embargoes because it's a trade-off for access, and that goes back to that bigger thing about, by the way, journalism is a misnomer for what we do.
Right.
We are dependent on these guys for access. You want to see the videos, you want to see the screenshots, we have to get them from those guys. So there has to be a trust relationship that's built here. And when that's broken, then things fall apart. Now, that's not saying that you couldn't, as an outlet, decide we're going to go it on our own. We're going to take public domain assets. We're going to wait until we get the game ourselves. We're going to capture our own screenshots. However, that's not what the audience is asking for. What the audience is asking for is a person that they believe in to give them an honest opinion, an honest take on games that they see ahead of time. And to do that, you have to have that relationship. So you have to have that, hey, I know the publisher and they're taking care of me, which then leads to those events, which are those big giant events like you go to some resort in Palm Springs so that you can spend 3 days playing Modern Warfare 3. But the upshot of that is that when Modern Warfare 3 comes out, you have a review of it.
Right.
So it's the bottom line is, if you're out there in the audience, you're paying attention, just read people. I mean, if I wrote something that was disingenuous about Modern Warfare, it would take all of about 6 hours after the game came out for someone to have played through the campaign, been like, what the hell is he talking about? This is he has no idea what he's doing, and I would be dead.
Yeah.
So you don't do that. I mean, but I don't even understand how someone would have that conception that you would do that in the first place. It would be career suicide.
Yeah,
We've had a lot of the worst comments and stuff always come on reviews that are out before the game is out.
Sure. Now, that does bring up the interesting question about the old thing about gumballing and placement and exclusives. And yeah, I mean, Shack News, my policy is that we're not going to do exclusives because exclusives are almost always now predicated on a score threshold.
Right.
And I'm not comfortable saying to a publisher, hey, you know what? I will guarantee you that you'll get at least X score if we can run this review. Granted, I mean, look, you go into some of these games and you're pretty confident, and not because of the name of the title. You're confident because over the past 24 months, you've seen this game 8 times. You know exactly what state it's in. You've seen it played. You played multiplayer. You played single player. You have a really great idea of where the game is. And unless it just is completely unraveling, okay, it's going to be, within a range of, say, a 7 to a 9. You might not be able to nail it down exactly. But I think that does cross the line then when you say, yeah, okay, I'm willing to say I will give you X in order to be able to put it up on Friday before Monday.
Right.
But I understand where it comes from. But it's not my direction.
Right. I hate that. I mean, I personally hate that. I had been approached about that when I was working in the media. Like, well, you can have this cover if you can tell me you can give it an 8. I'm like,
this game feels like a 4 or 5 right out of the gate, right? Because I got a copy right here. If you want.
Yeah, and you do go in with, well, again, it's about expectations. You've seen this game develop. You go, well, it looks like it's on track. I think I'm going to enjoy this, but you really cannot say until you've gone all the way through it, and the proof is in the pudding, and you have to trust yourself, and then you have to reach back to the publisher and say, I can't guarantee you any score because I haven't experienced it. Any movie reviewer that would write a review based on the trailer is not going to work long, and yet there you go. You have somebody, but you would go into with an
slightly
expectation.
Different production process there. I mean,
true, but until you've experienced the full product, it's not. Nobody would even want to give a score to something that they had not played,
right,
or fully experienced, let alone give somebody a guarantee of that score.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's a lousy practice, and I know that it happens, but I don't like it.
Along those lines, I'm glad that you brought that up. We do a thing. I know you guys watch every week, so I don't need to explain it to you.
Yeah.
But to the fans at home that haven't seen it, we're trying to work more actual fan feedback into feedback. So we're going to run down a couple of. We had hundreds of questions come in, and these were the top 5 or 6 that we really enjoyed. We're going to give you guys a prize. I don't know what it is, but it'll probably be a T-shirt or a soundtrack or something made of rubber. If the history is our guide for things that we've given away in the past. You can take that anywhere you want, Dan.
Is Saints Row offering the prizes on the show?
Is it purple?
We couldn't use it on the show, so we've got one very special prize for you guys. You can play sports and or do sexual things. It's really fun. But
your voice jumped an octave there.
Yeah, that's my sexy voice. That's my bedroom voice. I'm going to skip ahead to actually the second question because it's kind of to your point. Bee's Daddy says, now that you guys are starting Game of the Year discussions, do you feel that claiming one game is better than all the others counteracts your efforts to stop stop the oversimplification of game criticism, i.e. Metacritic. And I think that's along the same lines of scoring in general. But obviously, we've got our best of the year stuff coming up. We've got Video Game Deathmatch, which is actually, ironically enough, we let the fans do the same thing that we do internally, but for some reason they don't get angry at themselves for doing what we're doing internally.
Even though a very interesting thing has happened there.
Yeah,
with,
you know,
the Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, it really parallels a lot of the things that we as a whole are doing, but that's another conversation for another time. But do you feel that, you know, giving one game of the year, I know the biggest difficulty we had was not what was game of the year, but the fact that we only have 7 to 10 slots, and there's a lot of really good games this year. So which ones? Do you feel that kind of counteracts the oversimplification of games that people are right now having a really hard time dealing with?
I think the Game of the Year programs are going to run, whether they be, you know, one of these massive things that has 25 different genres and, you know, oh, here's the Xbox Game of the Year, here's the action Game of the Year, or whether they just be a top 10 list, you know, which is the way we've decided to go this year.
Sure.
Those will better reflect the variety and gradation of games that were out this year, as opposed to, like, I think what you're talking about is the homogenization of game response that Metacritic causes, because like we've really sort of zeroed in on this, and I guess it's sort of attributed to GameSpot, but I think it became bigger than that of this 7 is a good game thing. And so if 7 out of 10 is a good game, that doesn't really leave you a lot of leeway to differentiate within scoring systems. And so you see, well, there's all these games and they all have like 8s and 9s, but what's the difference between them? And then the difference comes when you start doing, you know, a little critical look at them and say, oh, okay, let's talk about the consideration for Game of the Years. And I hope that when we see these different features from outlets, that you'll get more than just here are the awards, but you'll also get here are the contenders, here's why they were a contender. Let's look at them, how have those games grown. Many of them have, you know, DLC packs that have come out since then. They might have a heavy multiplayer influence that has a great community that's built around them. And I think those are all parts of what's made them the game that they are for 2011.
Right. I mean, we have the opportunity and the advantage of, because we have a television show, we can explain all of our categories to an extent, and that helps us quite a bit. On the other end of things, Dan, though, and this is, feel free to not answer this question. But,
no, answer it.
But
Never.
maybe you, and maybe, you know, you don't have an official word, but how important is it for a game company to be on these Game of the Year lists? Do you feel like you're like a Call of Duty may not win Game of the Year, but it sold $1.8 quadrillion, so that's pretty successful, right?
I still think that it's when you get the approval of again a qualified opinion, as we've been talking about. You know, you get these professionals to play every game out there, and when they say, you know what, this is absolutely one of the best things, that's still such a huge compliment to the creative team rather than the bottom line sales.
Sure.
It's funny. I think it matters a lot. Again, I can't really speak to what Activision is because I haven't been in any of those meetings, but I do remember when I was at OXM, you know, GTA 4 came out. We put on the cover a couple of times. We gave it a 9.5. Everybody else gave it a 10. Rockstar was very, very angry because we ruined their press release where it said 10s across the board. And they actually did put out a press release. It said it got 10s across the board except for one. Yeah. and
it's
they,
a very Rockstar thing to do.
It was just...
I can't believe he voted Rockstar. I'm not even going to go there.
But yeah, I think that those accolades really do matter because it's a feather in the cap for the publisher, but I think that even more than that, it's like the ultimate thing for the creative team to go, oh my God, yes, we have all these people, and you know, people are angry at us on the forums, and they're telling us on Twitter, this is what's wrong with the game, this is what we don't like about the game. But then at the end of the year, you go, oh wow, we're in rare company, and they see their own game against 9 other games that they also loved. You know, like people forget that developers are gamers too.
Right.
You know, they're out there playing those same games. So to be considered among that company, I think is the ultimate thing for a developer. But yeah, publishers certainly do care. They love being able to say, you know, in the following year when they bring out the inevitable sequel, you know, the sequel to the game that made over 30 Game of the Year lists or something like that. You'll see that a lot, and they take great pride in being able to have that bullet point.
Right.
Yeah, and I think there is an interesting point there in the idea of, you know, people who have played so many things over the year saying what their favorite stuff is, because, you know, and I mean, I'm interested in that in the same sense that I read all the GameSpot Game of the Years. You know, it's like 100 pages.
Oh, their
something.
thing's massive.
Yeah, it's like
their undertaking.
I feel like they staff up,
but it's all
it's all
interesting and it's all good. You know,
Yeah.
And I don't think I really thought about this all this much before, but there was a thread on a certain very important popular gaming forum last week or earlier this weekend called "What's the worst game you've played this year?" And people were listing things like L.A. Noire, Dark Souls, Modern Warfare 3, and I'm just like, are you people out of your mind? Like, even if you don't like Dark Souls, worst game you played this year,
Right.
And people were like, well, it's the worst. I bought like 6 things this year because I don't buy bad games. So and I'm just like, the worst game I played this year was like Thor and Cursed Crusade and these terrible things. And everyone's like, we're not stupid enough to buy them.
Yeah.
So it's
Good
like,
point.
so it's like that we really do, when you play all these games basically for free, like you have a very different perspective than someone who has made wise purchasing decisions.
Right.
Well, and that also
investments of their time.
That ties a circle back together on the whole difference between, a citizen journalist and someone who's practicing this as a game critic, is that like they're very free to say, you know what, I don't like Dark Souls and I don't need to appreciate what's under the hood because it's not my cup of tea. I don't really give a damn.
Right.
Whereas as a game critic, if you approach it, yes, you're supposed to be able to bring your personal flavor to it. At the same time, you need to be able to say, wow, I've been playing games for, however long, and I played a lot of role-playing games, and I can really appreciate who this game's made for, and then how well it will connect with that audience. And that's what's important from a professional standpoint of looking at it, as opposed to citizen journalist who comes in and says, Dark Souls, man, I don't want to die that much. This sucks. I hate it. Throw it away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I think a lot of people's experience with that particular game. I, on the other hand, was like, I love that I'm dying so much because everything else is so good that I want to hate myself in this way. Cole of Cthulhu actually has something along those lines as well. As gaming journalists, but we've all agreed we're not actual journalists. Has your career changed how you play and enjoy video games? If so, what period of your gaming career did you enjoy more, now or before you started? I know I share Cube Space with Matt, and Matt does a lot of reviews, and I've looked over it quite a few times, and Matt has this crestfallen look on his face because he's like, I gotta play like 6 more hours of Thor because I want to be able to write the review for this game. But I personally like the fact that we do get games for free really makes my purchasing decisions a lot easier. But I think it really does in that I don't have to make them. But I think like honestly, like I actually get to enjoy a game like Dark Souls. That's something. Demon Souls is not something I probably would have been exposed to had I not worked in this industry. And because of that, it's been great. And also, part of the reason that I think I enjoy games more is because I have the experience of knowing people like you guys who make the games, and I see how much effort goes into these things. So I think I appreciate them a little more than most people do, and what people are able to accomplish. But you guys, I mean, now that you actually do this, it's really fun until you have to do it for a living, and then it's not so fun anymore. I actually still think it's pretty fun.
I totally disagree.
Really?
I have never enjoyed gaming more than today, and I wake up with that feeling pretty much every day.
Yeah.
There's always the next new innovation that's happening, and what I'm really enjoying seeing now is that technology, 6-7 years ago was about what's the new 3D going to be, and what's the next level of texture mapping we're going to be able to get. But now we're really starting to see a really epiphany of game design. You see people taking risks and doing games like L.A. Noire, which I think almost would have been better without the adventure game at all. It had just been, the facial recognition and interrogation stuff, which was really, can you even imagine a game doing that 2 or 3 years ago? It's very cerebral, it's very dramatic, it's very something that is outside the bounds of a video game.
Right.
And we see the same thing across everywhere, with the evolution of cinematic delivery like we have in the Uncharted games, with the evolution of multiplayer games, with all the stuff that, Modern Warfare has done, influencing as far as how communities can develop, and you see that across the Battlefield games. You see it in racing games like Forza. So anyway, there's always something new and exciting, and every morning I wake up and I'm like, well, what the hell are they going to show me with today? Because I'm excited and I love playing games.
Right. You actually just agreed with everything I said.
Yeah, actually.
Well, I was disagree with the negative side.
Oh,
of
yeah,
it,
yeah,
the
yeah,
negative
yeah.
implications.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm
I
not
was like, you stole all validation I built over the last 45 minutes. You just ripped it out with those 2 words. Totally disagrame.
I
mean,
think that people do ask me, like, when I visit home or whatever, that's like, so do you not like games now because it's like your job? It's like games aren't my job. My job is television.
Yeah.
Or your job is journalism, or your job is being writing. And it's like I'm pretty sure people who work at the Food Network don't get tired of eating filet. It's like oh,
pretty
food
sure
again.
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to do it anyway in
it's
my
like
free
you
time.
wouldn't be here if the subject matter wasn't what you loved in the first place.
Sure.
And Abby, Heppy, and I used to kind of sometimes talk about, it's like, what's it like playing games as a civilian? Like, what's it like if you only had to play what you wanted to play, and you didn't feel like you had to kind of create this, like, sort of release schedule wide opinion of what has happened this year. And like then it kind of occurred to me that like I don't think I'd ever not want to do that. Like I like playing Cursed Crusade and seeing how bad things are, because then when I go back to Skyrim, I remember like, oh, this is so good and it could have been like this, you know. And I think, you know, I've been playing games since Asteroids and when I was 3, and like every generation's better to me. I think this generation is amazing. I think you're absolutely right that it's no longer about, you know, it used to be about, like in the PlayStation 1 era, I was like, oh, this game has pop-up 100 yards out or 200 yards out. This racing game can, you know, render like half of the track until you can't see the cars and they pop in over the hill.
We've got 8 cars on the field.
Yeah. And now it's like you got Forza and Gran Turismo and you're just like, which photo is real and which one's a screenshot? And it's like, it's all about, you know, the animation and the ideas and the art design and taking the concepts and making them real. And like the tech, while it's going to obviously evolve, and we're about to hit the next gen again, and you're getting that gap between the current consoles and the PC technology. You can make a very different looking game on both. But like it really is like, you know, you look at something like The Witcher, and it's just like that's not about the technology so much. It's just like they took this world that was in these short stories and these books, and they put it in your screen, and it's right there, and it doesn't matter how many voxels or what shaders they're using, because what matters is like
you're in the world.
Geralt's there. Geralt's real, and you know, and you're having conversations with these people that are believable to some degree. It's amazing.
I remember taking a trip to Polyphony a number of years ago, and I remember this is an actual question and a good question at the time. Kaz was talking about the cars in the game, and a journalist stood up, and I'm going to go with German, because that's really the only accent I think I can do passably well.
Okay. And
he stands up and he's, you know, Kaz like, any questions? And he's like, how many polygons in each car? and I you not, nobody in the room was like, that's stupid. Everybody was like, and then pins at the ready.
Right, like, oh,
for
this
the
is
answer.
a stat I must include in my checklist.
Those are not things that we ask nowadays when they open up the floor for questions.
And
guys,
actually, one more thing I would say that is great about this job is that every once in a while, like, you get to go and say thank you to someone who made the game that you love so much, and things like that. Things where where you get to meet Yuji Naka and say that like Knights like pulled you out of a depression in August 1996, or like, or just being able to hang out with Todd Howard at E3 and be like, you made things that are amazing. And and that's a big deal to me, is that like meeting these people and interacting with them and being able to say like, to this person, I really love that. And that is why I think the social media stuff is so great, because now anyone can pretty much get on Twitter and tell Ken Levine that BioShock was awesome. Yeah. And he might write back. And it's great. That is the thrill of this job to me. And now it's kind of available to everyone. And I think that's excellent.
And Dan, you've experienced, I mean, from the print side to the digital side, and now here you are on the actual game side of things. Has there ever been a point in your career you're like, it's just really taking the joy out of games for me right now?
You know what? Yeah, there was one time early on at my years at GamePro, I started to get burned out. I just sort of, GamePro was very templated at the time. You would mention the graphics, you would mention the sound, you would mention the controls.
Polygons in the cars.
Polygons in the cars every time. How many levels? Is there a lava level? Is there a minecart level?
Behind that freaking out 5 out of 5 face.
That's right. Yeah, Mr. Fun Fact.
It was pain.
But yeah, I got to a point where I just wasn't having any fun anymore, which I had already done when I was in music journalism. And I went, well, I can't let this happen again. And it took about 2 weeks. I was still on the job, but I had to do a soul searching. Why am I still doing this? Do I still love games? Do I still love this? And that's what I realized is the key, is you have to keep being open to being amazed. You have to want to be amazed. You have to let the games amaze you, or else you do a really lousy job of this. And I always think, like, I'm 40 years old now, and if I could show my iPhone to 13-year-old Dan Amrich, I would cease to exist. I would kill myself. Hey, all those arcade games you're pumping quarters into? It's like a $2 app.
Right. Yeah.
I'll explain what an app is later. But every time I see something new in a game, I'm so appreciative of that game, of that innovation, and yeah, being closer to games, seeing sort of behind the curtain. Some people, they'll listen to the commentary track on a movie DVD and they'll go, oh, I like it more. And some people will be like, oh, you've ruined the magic. It never ruined the magic. I do appreciate it. Like you said, I appreciate it more having some insight into what goes into it.
Sure.
And then when I see it executed correctly or in a really beautiful way, I just go, man, that is so great. And sometimes I will write, and it just hi, I just want to let you know I finished the latest game. I really dug it, and and it's a beautiful thing to be able to go back to the people that have affected you and say you affected me too. You know, so yeah, I mean it gets. It'll burn you out if you let it burn you out. But if you remind yourself that you're in this for the love of games and that you really do love games, then it doesn't have to be a problem. And I enjoy games like you guys do. I enjoy games more now than I'm very nostalgic for my throwing quarters away.
Right.
But 8 games of Pac-Man is now more than Angry Birds.
Yeah.
For crying out loud. I mean, you've got to look at it with how much value are you getting now for all of these innovations that you see, compared to the old days. And
right. And it's much safer for my mom to leave me in the living room with my phone than to drop me off at the arcade for 6 hours? Really?
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
myself?
You'll be
9?
fine.
That's terrible.
You'll be fine. You'll learn how to fight.
Taught you survival.
Taught you survive. You
I
learn
wouldn't,
how to fight.
I wouldn't trade the arcade years for nothing.
Right. Look, it's not often that we have such a wonderful cross-section of the industry here, but we always get the same question on fan feedback. We didn't pick one of this week, but I know everybody's asking. Quickly, each one of you, your best advice to somebody trying to break into the industry. What advice do you give them?
Oh, easy. I gave it earlier because that question does come up all the time. Just write.
Right.
Basically, write all the time. And while you're playing a game, think about it. If you're going to approach it critically, think about, well, what are they doing here? Why is it interesting? Why am I enjoying it? And be able to answer that question first. Why am I enjoying this game? What do I like about this? And figure out how to articulate that. And that's your first step forward.
Right, Matt.
Well, I always say, where's the comma go? If you continually write stuff, and you can show us examples, whether it's on your own blog or just stuff you've written in private, but it should be private because people should be reading it and giving you feedback. That if I read something and I say this person has it down, how to write, how to communicate, and knows again why you like these things. That is the thing that nobody asks why. That's the key to critical thinking, and that's what you need to have in order to write about like game critics. Game critic is a more useful terminology for what we do because it requires criticism, critical thinking. That little Latin root keep coming back for you, but it's like, tell me why you like something, because it's not always clear why someone likes something. You don't always know why you like something.
Right.
That is a hard question. I've sometimes and sometimes I forget that, and sometimes I'm like, why do you like that? And they're like, I don't know. I just like, no, why do you like? And people get very mad if you keep asking them that. But if you can fire back at me, this is why I like this esoteric, subjective thing. That is a very valuable quality to have, and that will get my attention.
Right. Dan?
My cheesy answer is I'm actually just finishing up a book on how to get a job as a game reviewer.
Okay.
Like, I've been working on this for 8 years, and I'm this close to getting a publisher. So my full answer will be in the book. But really, as Garnett was saying, you have to write, but also get qualified feedback. Find a writing teacher at work. Find somebody whose writing you admire. Be willing to take the feedback, because that seems to be the biggest problem. People can write and write and write, but if they don't get something that tells them when they're on the right course or not, or somebody who can say, how can you do this better, or have you considered mentioning this or not mentioning this, or what did you think about this? That can help you refine your personal voice much, much faster. So yes, write as much as you possibly can, but find somebody who can help you refine your writing voice so that you understand that it is a process. You can't be a writer overnight. You have to work at it. It is a skill, and you will get more skill if you have a coach of some sort.
Right.
Anybody.
And then to add to all of those very great answers, because it is such a world of transparency now, really develop thick skin. Be okay with criticism, because not only is it going to happen, it will eventually make you a better writer and a better deliverer of information if you have the jobs that we have. And then back around the other way, and then unfortunately I have to let you guys go. Dan, I assume you're going to promote the book that you are hopefully getting published soon, but what do you guys have that you're working on right now that people should be looking forward to seeing?
I do a blog, a weekly podcast, and a ton of giveaways over at oneofswords.com. It is my official Activision blog. Activision let me set up my own thing, and I kind of had editorial autonomy, which people do not believe, but there is nobody coming to my door saying, hey, you have to do this right now. So I'm sort of allowed to be Activision's in-house reporter, and sometimes I deliver bad news, which is really fun. So that's all over at oneofswords.com.
You don't have like just a threatening photograph of Bobby Kotick behind you on the wall? Like, just,
no, I have the
there.
actual threatening Bobby Kotick who can stop by my office anytime. So far, he has not.
All right, good to know.
That's good.
Great. Matt?
Well, right after we're done taping this, I'm going to go up and start writing all the nominee packages for the hour-long Best of 2011 show that X-Play is doing. So that'll take a while. But yeah, that airs December 14th. Our nominees are already published, and many people have already screamed about them. And sorry, Zelda fans. And the final show will air December 14th with all the winners. And if you want to see that, go on. That's pretty much the next week of my life. So hope you like it.
So please watch and appreciate what this man is doing for you.
And
guys.
we're gonna dress Blair up in like a nice outfit, and that's not easy either. So
Well, I always get to wear a suit before I eventually have to put on the golden mullet costume.
Oh, the golden mullets are in January, and those are going to be
Oh,
amazing.
Yeah, we've got a couple ideas.
Doing
we're
it up
kicking
this
around.
time.
Yeah, Garnett. What
I
about
like how you put it, doing it up this time, as if they weren't before.
Well, this year, back in January, we did an Indiana Jones skit with Cliff Blazinski and Adam and Morgan and Blair.
was
And
short
then
round.
we instantly just cut to the rest of the episode was a Roadhouse parody. So
Yeah,
why
was
was the
weird.
first part Indiana Jones? We don't know. We just wanted.
Dude, it goes together. It's
we-
like
we-
you're watching TNT and you're like switching. I'm going to go to USA Network.
Oh, you're representing Saturday night television across all cable
Exactly.
networks. Is what we were
I think
doing.
you got it.
Yeah, we
Right.
just wanted to have Cliff do the accent. That's all.
Right.
It's,
Right. And Garnett, what about you?
Oh, you know our stuff. Come read Shack News. We have a great community. It's always fun to hop in and join the conversation. There's tons of games always being played, and everyone likes to talk about them. Listen to Weekend Confirmed. Watch our YouTube channel. I don't know. There's lots of stuff. You know how to find us.
We do a lot of things. is basically what he's saying.
it's a smorgasbord.
Right, right. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here. Please use your holidays to play all of the games. I know you haven't played yet, and you really, really want to. I will be doing the same. For you guys, again, thank you for being here, and you can catch new episodes every Wednesday at g4tv.com/feedback.